So, thank you very much. I'm very glad to have been invited to this conference to celebrate Emmanuel 60s. So, I was slightly surprised because, okay, we have been colleagues at Orsay. Even I was PhD student while Emmanuel was already a maître de conférence. Then we have been both maître de conférence together there for some time, and I think you went to the institute to Princeton for a few years, so we had we had a very good collaboration where I learned a lot of things on this computation of the self-intersection of the dualizing shift of the modular curve. So I learned a lot of Arakelov geometry, most of which I have now forgotten. But with Shouwu lecture, I see that there is a big opening to new collaborations and to compute new stuff using some analytic number theory. So, okay, this I will come back. So, and then I was wondering what I could talk about for such a conference, because currently I'm much more into trace function and applied L-adic cohomology. And okay, it's not a bad place to speak about this, but maybe not for Emmanuel. But then I remember that we are also very interested in equidistribution problems. And so now Emmanuel is more bifurcating towards Zariski density than full equidistribution. But still also I learned, so it is with when they work with Laurent Clauzel on some aspect of homogeneous dynamic, and also so your work with Laurent and E on equipoint, that also I started to think about this and do a bit more of homogeneous dynamic. So now I will try to discuss some equidistribution problem, building an homogeneous dynamic, and also in the end some more core arithmetic application. So so my Shimura variety will be the most basic one. So just the full modular curve, which whose complex point correspond to the set of complex elliptic curves. And so, as you know, inside this modular curve, you have the so-called CM point attached to imaginary quadratic order. So most of the time it will be a maximal one. And this corresponds to elliptic curves which have a complex multiplication by this order. And in the complex setting, it's a very elementary definition, so I just stated it. What is important about the CM point is that they are in bijection, in that case with the Picard group of the order, and in fact it's even a torsor. And in particular, the number of CM point is about square root of the discriminant by Ziegel's theorem. And then you have these CM point on the modular surface, which have these complex coordinates over representation of D by this quadratic form. And the one important result in this area, these are Duke's equidistribution theorem, which state that when the discriminant grow, the set of CM point become equidistributed relative to the natural measure. So here is a picture, so it's not, I've not done the beautiful trick of Yves, but I could not do it. It was reversing one coordinate is too hard for me, but okay. So these are CM points and not Eke points.
So you had the condition that this fundamental, that you have complex multiplication by the full ring of integers, yes?
By this quadratic order.
So it also holds for all quadratic orders.
Equidistribution holds for all the imaginary quadratic orders.
Oh, okay.
But I stated it for fundamental ones because it's what Duke proved. And so you have equidistribution or a perception of it, and there are basically three different approaches in Duke, in the proof of Duke equidistribution theorem. So one is due to Linic, and it's anterior to Duke's, and it's via dynamics. It's a so-called ergodic method. And but it's valid for only for a subsequence of all, say, fundamental discriminant, namely the ones that split a prime that you have fixed before. So basically, it's only half. It would work only for half of the discriminants, but you can vary the prime, and you have another half. But in a sense, it does not cover. So Duke original proof was to realize the Weil sums attached to this equidistribution problem. So did I write the Weil sum? Yes, so these would be the Weil sums. And here you take Eke eigenform as your function f, although it's not in general, it's not compactly supported. But anyway, this is what you have to do. And then these Weil sums are connected to Fourier coefficient of metaplectic forms. And then one needs to bound with Fourier coefficient to prove that the Weil sum converge to 0. And then this was due to Iwaniec and Duke. And the third approach is to realize the Weil sum as in terms of central values of L function. So this is the so-called Walsh-Purgé formula. And then you need to prove bounds for this L function, and these are the so-called subconvex bounds, which in that situation were proven first by Duke, Friedlander, and Iwaniec. And and the second and the third proof are also related via another formula Walsh-Purgé relating L values to square of Fourier coefficients of metaplectic forms. So, but in a sense, in my sense, the first and the third proof are the best ones, I would say, because they involve groups and group actions. While it's harder to see in the second approach. And so Linic's ergodic method is really tough to understand, I think. So we had a full project with Manfred Eichzidler, Ilan Lindenstrauss, and Akshay Venkatesh about understanding just this little book, because it was written classically. But if you now identify the modular surface with a locally homogeneous space, and even more adelic one, and if you do the same for the set of CM points, which correspond to a torus orbit inside this quotient, then I guess so. Walsh-Purgé formula, of course, but also Linic ergodic method becomes easier to understand and to approach and to put into the orthodox language of modern homogeneous dynamics. But yeah, Linic, it goes back to the late 50s. So very few things were existing at that time. Margulis' thesis was not there, so okay. So about this Duke theorem, then with Venkatesh we made a refinement, a kind of refinement of Duke equidistribution theorem. What we did, it was we were looking at pairs of CM points inside two copies of the modular surface, and these 2 points are connected using the action of the Picard group. So we take a Egner point, and the next pair is Egner point, but with the ideals, the same ideal, but multiplied by an auxiliary ideal, which we call B. And so this defines our set of pairs of Egner points. And then what we want to understand is the distribution of these pairs inside this product. And so we made this conjecture. It is that if this the class B has a minimal representative whose norm goes to infinity, so then it automatically implies that the discriminant goes to infinity by geometry of numbers. Then we conjecture that this pair of Egner points, of connected Egner points, equidistribute on the modular, on the two copies of the modular surface. And okay, so sorry, yeah. And if the norm remain constant of the B parameter remains constant, then you can easily see that this set of pair of points, in fact, equidistribute, but only along the graph of the Eke correspondence given by the norm of B. And also this conjecture, you can extend it and consider tuples of CM points, which are connected by multiplication by different BIs, and you have a very natural condition on the pair of different BIs to get a full equidistribution on this full product.
Just to be sure, in the conjecture you assume D and the norm to go to infinity.
Yeah, so, but if the norm of the minimal representative goes to infinity, then D goes to infinity by geometry of numbers. But yes, yeah. So both go to infinity. But especially this one, because if it does not go to infinity, then you will stay on a modular curve. Okay, and so what comes in the proof of such a conjecture? What could first, if you do, if you could use a Walsh-Purgé formula also for this to attack this problem, and then if you do Walsh-Purgé formula, you can prove the conjecture, but for B's of norm going to infinity, but at a small enough speed. So your norm has to be smaller than D to the alpha for some alpha which depend on the progress on the subconvexity problem. And if you are willing to assume generalized Lindelof hypothesis, then the maximum alpha you could make by a dumb application of Walsh-Purgé formula and Riemann, it's 1/4. So you have a big gap because you would need to cover the B's of norm between D to the 1/4 and D to the 1/2 plus. So yeah, you are a bit stuck with harmonic analysis, okay, because even the L function have zeros on the critical line, so the zero exists. So there are limitations, but in a breakthrough work, so Kayutin proved the full conjecture. Okay, or okay, maybe I need to be more precise. He proved the conjecture. So for subsequence of these, so it's a bit like in Linnick work. What he needed, he needed to take sequence of D that were splitting two primes. So, for instance, 3 and 5. So then you have equidistribution, but only for 1/4 of the discriminant. And he needed this condition to use a very deep and general classification theorem by Einsiedler and Lindenstrauss for rank 2 diagonalizable actions. And so these rank 2 diagonalizable actions come from the fact that the torus associated to the quadratic field would split at these two primes, P1 and P2, under this condition. But he needed a bit more. Also, he needed to assume that the L function of the quadratic field had no Landau Siegel 0. So this is not GRH. This is much weaker than GRH, but this is still there. And okay, and then he needed to use Duke's theorem just to apply the Einsiedler-Lindenstrauss classification. But the hard part was so this classification would give you a certain set of suspects as the limiting measures for this equidistribution problem. So these are called algebraic measures. And to show that the only measure that was occurring was a full measure, he has to do some harmonic analysis. So he has to evaluate the geometric side of some relative trace formula. But unlike usual use of the relative trace formula, the test function that he needed to input were very spiky. And so to digest the spikiness, and he just stayed on the geometric side, then he used the sieve method, so techniques from analytic number theory. And I will try to give you an idea of what are the kind of sieve methods which are at play. So you have a beautiful combination of many different kinds of ingredients that are entering into Kajutin's proof.
Just to be sure, the first conjecture you made implied the Andreev for Y01 cross Y01 directly?
You tell me? Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Just
okay.
to know.
Okay. Yeah. But it's not even it's not a risky density. It's equidistribution. So, but yeah. But I don't know if we made this conjecture for André Hort. But okay, I remember there was this work of Edixhoven, and then we were looking at small split prime and so on. Yeah.
You knew that if you have a sequence of a couple of points on the curve, they had to be on with the same.
Yeah. Okay, and then I just want to make some. There is another approach to this mixing conjecture now, which has been first proposed by Valentin Blomer and Farrell Brumley, and subsequently Maxime Radziwiłł joined. And their approach, it starts from a Walsh-Purgé formula and use heavily the analytic theory of L function. So this is really purely analytic number theory, so no homogeneous dynamics. And their approach seems to allow to remove the two splitting condition at two split primes. So they can get all the discriminant, but they still need something to have an abundance of a small split prime. But the condition they need is it's of the same strength as no Landau Siegel 0. So it's not as in your paper with André and where are you? Yeah, and Bruno. You don't need the big GRH, and you need much less small split prime than the one that you need in this. Okay, but this is for the full André Hort. But okay, so it's a much weaker assumption that GRH is really on the same level as no Landau's eagle, which is already quite difficult. And so next Monday we have in fact a collaborative project called Etienne between Switzerland and France, and there is a hybrid seminar, and Farrell is giving a talk explaining what they have at the moment. It's Etienne, it's équidistribution en théorie des nombres. Je ne sais pas pourquoi on a trouvé cet acronyme. Ça, okay, so now what I want to discuss is a bit what happens if you replace the imaginary quadratic field with the split quadratic algebra, Q square. And if you think about it, an analog of the mixing conjecture could be the following. So, okay, this I is a bit arbitrary, but I take it just for convenience. And what you would do, so let's say you would take this set of complex points, A plus I over Q, you take a modulus Q, you take A plus I over Q, you take AB plus I over Q, and you vary A modulo Q, so you get this pair of, in fact, when Q is prime, it's almost a pair of equipoints, which are connected by this multiplication by B. And you want to know how they distribute inside, again, of two copies of the modular surface. Then you need the norm of the ideal, so the little b is our ideal B. And then for the norm, what we need, we look at this lattice, so defined by this simple congruence, modulo Q, and we take the minimum of this lattice. So by geometric number is smaller than square root of Q. And then now the conjecture in that case is a theorem. So we proved it with Valentin Blumer when Q is prime, and Edgar Hassing did the general moduli. And it says that if the minimum of this lattice goes to infinity, then my set of, I would say, equipoints become equidistributed on the product of two copies of the modular curve. Okay, and so this is the Weil sum formulation of this equidistribution problem. Okay, so I have a, okay, here are a few pictures representing this theorem. Okay, so what you see dots, so the fundamental domain, and dots of two colors, red and green. So how do we draw this picture? So we take an A, which gives you a point, and then you take a point corresponding to AB. And so suppose that the point corresponding to A lands into the left side of the fundamental domain, and simultaneously the point corresponding to AB lands on the right-hand side of the fundamental domain. Then we draw the 2 points, one in red and one in green. And so you see that, so in a sense, we draw only 1/4 of all the possible points, the one which have this specific distribution, and still it's completely equidistributed. Okay. So I don't remember, B was of size square root of Q, and I don't remember which sequence of Q we took, but okay. Okay, so it's okay, and so some idea about the proof of this split case. So the most basic thing would be to look at the Weil sum. So then we take F1 and F2 to weight zero mass forms, mass cusp form, for instance. And if you look at take the Fourier expansions and look at what you get, then you exactly get an average over integral points inside this specific lattice And then you have a product of the Eker eigenvalue of the two Eker forms, F1 and F2. So you have this sum of this product, and the length of the variable n and m, they are both less than q. These are Whittaker functions here. So they decay very rapidly. And so what you would like to show is that this is converging to 0. So you see you have a sum of integral points inside, say, a square of length q. So you have q square points. These are connected by a congruence modulo q, so you divide by q, and then you normalize with this 1 over q. So you just the trivial bound is about 1, and you want to improve it to convergence to 0. Okay. And you can analyze this sum using harmonic analysis, and in fact this type of problem is a so-called shifted convolution sum, and we have worked a lot to study this shifted convolution sum, and the Spectrag theory of automorphic form gives you the decay of the Weil sum as soon as the minimum is bounded by q to the 1/2 minus 2 theta and a little bit less, and this 2 theta is the approximation toward Ramanujan-Peterson. Okay. But this theta, it does not come from F1 and F2 themselves, but it comes from say, the automorphic, the Cuss form that decompose the product F1, F2. Okay, so, and so then you see we are much closer than for the mixing conjecture, because theta is almost 0. But even if we had the Ramanujan-Peterson conjecture, we still would have to cover a gap between 1/2 minus theta and 1/2. So there still remains a lot of possible B's for which we need to do something. Okay, but for these B's, then this is for these B's that we will use homogeneous dynamic again. Okay, and so the first step is to lift everything to S arithmetic quotient. And here the R arithmetic quotient will, of course, contain infinity. It may contain anything which has to do with the level of the problem you started with, of the level of your modular curve. And it contains two auxiliary primes, and which are fixed and co-prime with Q. And then you observe the very trivial identities. Okay, what? Whoop. Yeah. Okay, you have these trivial identities. If you look at your set of pair of Eker points, then you see that this set of pair of Eker points is invariant if you multiply the A by P1 square and on both sides, and the same for P2 square. It's really change of variable, completely obvious. But this trivial remark, it has an important consequence. It means that the measure that is above these pairs of Eker points, it is invariant by two pairs of diagonalizable matrices. So this one and for these diagonal matrices for P1 and for P2, and these are diagonalizable. And this is just the obvious fact that the split quadratic algebra splits every prime. So we use it in a sense. The Linux condition is trivially satisfied because we are in the split case. So we use, this invariance gives us the rank 2 action that one needs in Einzidler-Lindenstrauss theorem. Okay? And then you know that this measure will equidistribute to the full measure on each factor, because this is Eker point equidistribution. And then we have the outcome is the following. Any weak limit of this sequence of measures is a convex combination of algebraic measure, and in this case, this is a certain amount of the full measure and a convex integral of so-called diagonal measures, which are measures supported along the R measure supported along the shift of a diagonal embedding of the full group once. Okay. And okay, so what we need to do, we need to show that under the condition that the minimum goes to infinity, this the diagonal measure portion is does not exist. Okay, and okay, good. And suppose I will simplify. I will just assume that instead of having an integral, because we just know that this is a probability measure, but we don't know anything about its shape, just that it has mass 1 and is positive. So I will just assume that the measure we want to eliminate is the standard diagonal measure, just to explain the K ingredient. Okay, yeah. So suppose I just want to eliminate the diagonal measure. So what I can do is, if I take F2 to be the complex conjugate of F1, and you know, if I take the diagonal measure against this pair of functions, I get the L2 norm of F1, and it's something positive. So if I am able to find a F1 for which my Weil sum converges to 0, I will be sure that there is no such diagonal measure. Okay, so but I need just to find one. So I don't need to do it for every F, just to find a counterexample. And okay, so let me simplify this sum. So what do we have? We have a sum, normalized sum over element of a lattice, which are bounded of volume Q, which are bounded by Q, and we have the Eker eigenvalue, and we want to show it's going to 0. So suppose I replace this product just by the function 1. So then I would be counting the number of points in the lattice of norm less than Q. And then there is the Lipschitz principle, which maybe was also Lipschitz principle, but in a much simpler form. And what do you get? Then you get a term corresponding to the area of the domain. So you get this main term, which is which is something positive and bounded, and then you get an error term involving the perimeter of your domain and the minimum of the lattice in the denominator. So what you see that in this Lipschitz principle, your error term is good as soon as the minimum goes to infinity. And the problem, of course, is here that you have a main term. So, okay, so it means that in order to this converging to 0, you really need to exploit the fact that you have Eker eigenvalue and that these are changing size and sign. Okay, so and it's quite a hard problem. Okay, but we need to exploit this variation, but these on average are less than 1. So this is what we want to show, or even go to 0. On average, we want to show they are 0. So, and then what we do, it's a bit crazy, but experience show it can work. We, instead of bounding the original sum, we just put absolute value everywhere. Okay, so we are just bounding the sum of product of absolute value of Eker eigenvalue. So what we are gaining in this move is that here we have positive, non-negative functions. So we gain some positivity, and these non-negative functions are also multiplicative functions. And if you have a positive multiplicative function which you want to sum, then there are a lot of there exist techniques in multiplicative number theory and sieve theory that you can use. And it is so really the basics come from the work of Volcker and Nair Tenenbaum, and it's in a sense it was elementary analytic multiplicative number theory. So. Okay, and what you need for this to work, you need your multiplicative function not to grow too big. So we need, for instance, a bound like this, that it's bounded by the divisor function to some power. And in our case, it means we need that F1 satisfies the Ramanujan-Petersen conjecture. Okay, and suppose we have this, then what the sieve method gives you, they give you this, okay, I will erase, they give you this kind of complicated expression, but just, so this corresponds to the first term, and it is here of size 1, but now you have something in the denominator, you have an auxiliary parameter z, and appearing with log z square. And then you have this sum, which is an exponential of sum over the primes of your multiplicative function with absolute value. And then you have an error term, which would be small because you have a negative power of z. And then you have what corresponds to the boundary error term in Lipschitz principle. And so it is penalized by some power of z, but it still has the minimum in the denominator. Okay. Now what you want to do is to evaluate this sum, and it's a sum of absolute value of Eke eigenvalue along the prime. So you can look for satotate. And so, okay, we need mass forms. So we don't have satotate for a mass form, but we have enough symmetric powers to know that this sum is bounded by some number strictly less than 1 times log z. So it stays that this, and it could be either, and for a CM form, it's even better. So this 17 over 18, it's less than 1, and you have 2 copies of it, so you have something less than 2, and if you take the exponential in the in the 2 log z square, you get a saving in the log term. Just 1/9 of log z, but it's still a saving. It's going to 0. And then you have the rest. Okay, and the rest is good because you know that you can, you have already solved the problem when the minimum was very small. And so as soon as the minimum is some tiny positive power of q, this term will go to 0 as well if you adjust your parameter correctly. So, and then this is how you win in the end. So, but the last step is to produce weight 0 mass form with trivial central character and satisfying Ramanujan-Petersen. And okay, and for this we need okay, even if we are on at a problem involving at the group level, so we could in principle have any weights. Because we had this convex linear combination of diagonal measure to eliminate, we really need to take unramified principal series at infinity, so weight 0 mass form. So we cook one, we take our F1 to be a mass form coming from this, from a non-trivial class group character of this real quadratic field, which we twist by a Dirichlet character whose square is the Legendre symbol. So we kill the Legendre, the Nebentypus of this F29. So we have something with trivial central character. So it's a little bit of small arithmetic. It's always fun. And okay. So how? Maybe 20 minutes?
20 minutes?
cool, perfect, excellent. For once, I'm not late, so appreciate this.
So at this point, you have to be in level 1, that's what you said?
Not level 1, because I can lift my problem to, so that's why in my S arithmetic thing I introduce my set of S is a little bit bigger. Yeah. So I will take N to be 229 or, okay, yeah.
So you could take any even Galois representation, no?
Even, and these are, and
they are associated to mass forms.
And there exist also?
Well, I think people show that, yes.
People have found a trivial central character and...
I suppose so, yeah.
Okay. Ah, okay, okay. Okay, yeah, even if the group is finite, it would... Okay. Okay, okay, even... but, okay, the CM form exists since mass, so... okay, okay, we don't know enough... it is tired, it's the end of the week. Yeah. Okay, so now I will pass to, because we found it a bit frustrating of not using the true satotates for generic, so for the CM form it's a bit cheating. So, okay, so here is another application of this line of thought, which is joint work with Achai and Brungale and Junhui Min and also Valentin Blumer. And here the starting point is we take the holomorphic form of weight 2, and then by Shimura, you know, there exist two periods, two complex periods, out of which you can form the so-called algebraic central value or special value of the twist of f by a character chi. And so it's an algebraic number and satisfies Shimura reciprocity law. And in particular, this algebraic L value is contained into the field generated by the modular form, by the Fourier coefficient of the modular form and the character chi. So this Eke field. Okay, we have this inclusion from Shimura. And okay, yeah. And so now I will focus on Dirichlet character of modulus Q, a power of P. So then the group of all these characters, it's stratified according to their conductor, and it also split as a product of tame characters and wild characters. And you have one of the big result around this is the theorem of Rohrlich, which says that for all but finitely many such characters, the algebraic L value, and in particular the central L value, does not vanish. Okay, it's a very cute result. And so just I explain why it's, briefly why it's connected to analytic number theory, is that, so first, okay, you isolate the tame part, and one focus on the wild part, and one needs, it is sufficient by Galois invariance to prove that this trace is non-zero over this field extensions. So you just remove the tame part or take it to be trivial. And then what you can see is that this trace is in fact a sum of algebraic values, and then it's a sum of central values of L functions. So you have a hope to use techniques from analytic number theory or even homogeneous dynamic in some cases. So, okay, and then you have this is how you prove that this trace is non-zero, and so consequently any member of the any summand in the trace is also non-zero. Okay, and Luo and Ramakrishnan have exploited this further, and I've refined the the analytic work of Rohrlich, and so obtain other result. And here is one more recent result that I want to, which is a starting point of this part. It's the recent work of Haesang's son, which is proves the converse to this inclusion. He proved that if P does not divide the level, then for all but finitely many P power conductor characters, the Ecke field is in fact generated by the algebraic value, and you need to add a few P roots of unity. Okay, so it's and it's valid for all but finitely many. So it's and okay. So now here is the application we have. It's a kind of same result. We need a bit more conditions like this, but and we need R to be square free. But under this additional condition, we have that for all but finitely many P power conductor characters, the Ecke field is in fact generated by the P roots of unity and the square of the algebraic value, so a totally real number. Oh, okay. It's okay. From this perspective, the difference does not look too much, but the proof is very different and has quite a bit more ingredients. Okay, and okay, you can improve the condition square free by this more technical condition, but we don't really want it. But how we bridge with the first part of the talk in the proof? So, so this is basically what we have to show. So we can fix the tame part of the character, so I will just take it to be the tame part to be trivial. So we'll take a wild character, and I want to show these two inclusions. And if it's also revolve about proving that some trace does not vanish. And so here I've normalized the trace. So we have now to prove for various parameters, auxiliary parameters, that this trace is not zero. So, and okay, so I will just simplify. I will take this extra parameter to be 1, just to and what. So then you translate this trace into sum of L functions. And so then what you need to do is to evaluate this sum. So you want to take the character of conductor Q, the prime power P to the K of the square of this L value, and you want to insert this condition that the tame part of the character is trivial. Okay, and the way to digest this condition is just to say that I will use sum over all characters, but you take the P minus 1 power of the character inside in the twist. Okay, and so then this thing you can analyze using standard method from the theory of L function. So, and then you face this sum over mn's of eigenvalues of f, and then the mn, they are connected by the congruence p to the m minus 1 congruent to n to the p to the n minus 1. So instead of the previous congruence, you have this, but this congruence, in fact, it's split into disjoint union of congruences, and this what you have to evaluate is the sum that we had before, but when the pair Mn is varying in this lattice, which is determined by this P minus 1 root of unity modulo Q. Okay? So then we have this bunch of P minus 1 sum to handle. Okay, so if the the root of unity is a trivial one, then you get essentially something non-zero because it's a Rankine-Selberg type sum. And in fact, it has a log q, but I simplified the sum, so I miss the log q. So if the root of unity is -1, then it's you have the congruence condition m plus n congruent to 0 mod q, and m and n are positive, so it means that one of the two has to be of size q, and they are bounded by q, so you don't have many solutions, and in the end you get a very small error term. And then you have the other ones when the xi is different from 1 or -1. And in that case, the minimum of the lattice, at least it's a positive power of q, but in fact it could be very big. It could go up to q or very close to q. So then you face the same problem that we had before with the mixing conjecture of we have this it was the parameter called b, and we have to address the problem when b could yield to a very large minimum, close to q to the 1. Yeah, could. And then we use a sieve method and satotate, but now the true satotate, so the most complete one. And then, because we know full satotate, this exponent can be replaced by really the satotate, the average value of absolute value of Ecke forms, and then we get an error term. And so in the end, we show that our trace is non-zero from the main term. Okay. And okay, I think it is it, and I want to thank you all and wish you a happy 60.
Question.
Does hyoting works for higher tuples?
This, yes, you could, yeah, because the equidistribution? Yeah. The first, yes, yeah, because you can, in Einsiedler-Linden shows, you can take several copies if you want. It's like, and then what you need is B1 over B2 to yield a minimum, which is growing for every BI and distinct pairs.
The sieving method might be more complicated?
No, because it's like a Gursa type lemma, you need to test 2 by 2. So maybe also a funny thing, I don't know what to do, we don't know what to do with it, but this is with Manfred and Elon. So we could do, okay, plus I over Q, A cube plus I over Q, and BA plus I over Q. So something like this. So even, you see, the have a different speed. Okay, we can only put monomials, but if we have different monomials which are not inverse of one another, you have also full equidistribution. And, but surprisingly, the hard case is this one, because if you are in such a situation, you have your tori which act at different speed, and you cannot have diagonal measure. So it's funny. It's easier, but yeah, you could have a bunch of things. Yeah.
And in your first conjecture, but with more variables, is there some work done? Or?
So the work of Kayutin also gives several copies. Okay. Again, it's the same. You need to check pair by pair. If you have equidistribution of pair, you have full and compatibility, natural condition, then you have the full equidistribution. and yeah. But the approach by the analytic approach by Blomer, Brumley, and Radziwill, so they use at some point they need a Parseval, and so Parseval it's only with two things, and so for the moment, unless they have a new trick, they can do two copies. Maybe I want to point out about this. You see, this analysis here, yeah, this kind of thing, you can see it also if you want as a, or at least the proof behind it. You can see it as a bit of a split version of the work of Cornu and Watzal. So, excepted that they eliminated the problem. So you see, in this p-1, this parameter xi, it would be maybe something like the class number time p-1 or p+1, because in their work they want to eliminate the tame characters, the tame ring class characters, and average only over the wild one, and it's the same thing, but we use a different approach.
No further questions? There's another one.
Yeah. Have people started to look at Roser-Schimura curve of maybe A2?
Of?
A2, module space of abelian surfaces.
Okay, so in okay, I have not. So for the mixing, the original, of course, then there you have. I've not that I know. I would imagine that it's okay. Maybe Farrell talk. Maybe we'll speak about it, or you can talk to him about it. But it's built on Walsh-Purgé, which exists. So I think what they do should be doable, because they don't, unlike here, they do not exploit splitting of the quadratic algebra. So they work. I think what they do should work in general. I don't remember if Kayutin does a more general quaternion algebra. Okay, and in the totally real case, you have this work of George Robinson, because, as you know, Wiles is wants to prove a non-solvable base change using this version of this mixing conjecture for totally real fields. So there is the thesis of George Robinson, which I think does what Kayutin does over totally real fields. And I don't remember exactly.
If you get a product of Y1 with another...
so then it's easy, because you cannot have a diagonal measure.
So you can really use Eisenstein-Nash-Ross. We still need to prove.
Yeah, we did it with Manuel Luthi, Andreas Wieser, and Meniaka. For instance, you take CM elliptic curve, and you look at its supersingular reduction modulo 10 inner primes, and the sequence of curve equidistribute on the product of the supersingular locus simultaneously. So yeah, this was done, but it's simpler because you never have diagonal measures. But we have the condition that D must split 2 primes. You need the rank 2 action. This, I don't know.
All right, thanks. Philippe again.